Well, good morning, everyone. Those of you who are with us in person and those of you who are with us virtually. Glad to be with you this morning. I'm Mark Neikirk, the director of the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at Northern Kentucky University. And we are a partner in the Northern Kentucky Forum with the 3 public library districts in Northern Kentucky and Boone, Kenton, and Campbell County to bring you the Northern Kentucky Forum. And our commitment is to talk about issues of interest to our community and to host civic dialogues. This morning we are going to learn about the consequences of the earthquake in Turkey and hear from some of our neighbors who are from Turkey so that we can understand the impact of this event in a deeper way. Those of you who are with us in person will have questions at the end. Just raise your hand and the room is mic'd so we'll be able to hear you. And those of you who are joining us virtually, if you'll notice at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A function, just type the question in that spot. I will monitor the questions and ask them when it's time for that. I'd also like to, before we start, just thank Norse Media. Norse Media are students, largely students who are majoring in electronic media and broadcast, and they are doing our cameras today. They've been with the forum since the pandemic and have been great allies in making sure that we can broadcast this virtually and now in a hybrid environment. Also, the photograph that you see over our shoulders and that you saw when the webinar was opening is from the Associated Press, and I want to give due credit to AP and its photographers who are around the world and have been in Turkey considerably taking photographs and documenting what's there. There is a app you can subscribe to on your phone to receive Associated Press the Associated Press news feed. It includes at the end of each week an AP photo gallery from around the world that's kind of interesting to see. Some amazing photojournalism is happening. We want to get started, and let me introduce the panelists who are with us this morning. First, at the end of the table is Dr. Bulent Erenay, excuse me. He is an NKY professor of global supply chains. Bulent, anything else you want to add about that?
No, that was good.
All right, and then next to Murat is Dr. Ada Cenkci, also an NKY professor in organizational leadership. And next to me, Dr. Murat Ozer is from University of Cincinnati, and he is a professor who teaches kind of at the intersection of criminal justice and information technology. So thanks everyone for being with us. I should add also that we had planned to have another panelist, Mehmet Sulu, who teaches in the College of Education, is very focused on behavioral modification for preschool children, some really fascinating research that he's working on. He had a family emergency and could not be with us this morning, but we'll be thinking of him. To get started, Dr. Erenay is going to give us an overview of what's happened in Turkey.
Mark, thank you for the introductions. Hello everyone. As Mark mentioned, my name is Dr. Bulent Erenay. I'm from Turkey. I'm from Gaziantep, one of the hardest hit cities in the earthquake region. I would like to thank you for you joining us in here and for the other participants joining virtually. I will do a very quick presentation and to give you guys a background about what happened in Turkey on February 6th, and then I'll give you guys some numbers and stats, and so that we can understand the impact, the aftermath of those 2 big earthquakes. Okay. So what happened? Let's start with that one. On February 6th, 2 major earthquakes happened in southeast and central Turkey and northwestern Syria. You can see you can see the area affected from the earthquake from this map. If you are not familiar with the geography of Turkey, Turkey is located between Europe and Asia, and neighbors Bulgaria, Greece, and etc. And the earthquake happened at the border of Syria. So the first earthquake hit a district town known as Pazarcık near a major city, Gaziantep. It lasted officially 65 seconds, but if you ask my relatives, it's like forever. It was like 65 seconds. And the next one actually happened around 9 hours later. And it hit around 90 kilometers or around 56 miles north of the same area. And it was, the magnitude was 7.5 or 7.6, and that lasted 45 seconds. The quakes, as you can see from the map, felt across Egypt, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, parts of Iraq, even in Cyprus, and actually have effects in those countries as well. People died in those countries as well. So the affected area is around 100,000 square kilometers. So if it doesn't make sense, it's as big as Ohio. So it had a really big area, and it affected 26 million people, but the more direct effects was around on 13 million people. So what makes this earthquake different than the other ones? I just read this. The graphics that you see over here are from a recent article from Nature, and actually they call it a super event because they don't see two major earthquakes happen in the same area within a very short time frame. That was one of the reasons actually that has this much destruction and death. So Turkey sits on two major fault lines. One of them is North Anatolian fault line from here, and the other one is East Anatolian fault line, and the earthquakes happen on the East Anatolian fault line. And the thing that on this picture on the right hand side, this is the earthquake hit area. You can see, and the dust over here that you see are the magnitudes and frequency of the aftershocks. There were thousands of them. It was not just maybe one to it, but there were thousands of literally. I talked to my sister yesterday, and she told me that they were feeling every 10 to 15 minutes. There was no way to go to sleep, and you feel like an earthquake is happening all the time. And this one is just from February only. So from February 6th until February 28th, these two are the major earthquakes, 7.8 and 7.6 in magnitude, in size. And I mean, I don't think I need to explain this graph over here. So every single day, they had hundreds. So in February only, you can see that thousands of hot aftershocks happen. Some of them are as big as 6.4. That one can be classified as a big earthquake, that one itself. Even in that earthquake, actually, by the way, many people died. People went into those buildings and died after that. Turkey is no stranger to earthquakes. That's what we're going to talk about here today, actually. So, I mean, I vividly remember what happened in Van in 2011, 7.2. This is at least at one of the fault lines again. I remember what happened in Izmir, and the people died over there. It's just 2020, and actually I lived 7.4 and 7.2 earthquakes in Istanbul. I was a college student. So it was 45 seconds, but like my sister said, it was forever. It's not 45 seconds. You feel like you're gonna die every second over there. So these are the major fault lines. As you can see, almost every part of Turkey, except for the central part, is kind of on the earthquake fault lines. So we are no stranger to this. We should know better, but unfortunately, the effect of these earthquakes are still devastating. So in the last 122 years, Turkey, by the way, that's the official name of Turkey right now, Turkey and its surroundings have been struck by more than 200 major earthquakes. Aftermath. These are official numbers, and what official numbers actually say. So I always put a question mark when officials say something, and in here and in Turkey, it doesn't matter. So more than 160,000 buildings across 11 provinces, 11 cities, either collapsed or were severely damaged. And Voice of America says that there were 520,000 housing units. Consider every housing unit is like houses like 4 or 5 people, 3, 4, 5 people. We can see. Sorry, right? This is about my daughter. I'm doing that. I mean, you can estimate the number of people affected with that one. Officially, as of April 6, more than 58,000 people died in the earthquake, and around like 50,000 in Turkey and more than 8,000 in Syria. They say that more than 100,000 people injured, many thousand of them actually lost limbs. 3.3 million people left the region, most of them for good. I just talked to one of them yesterday. I'm gonna, when we were talking about other issues, I'm gonna talk about what she said to me about her kids and the trauma that they're going through. As of now, 2 million people live in tents and in container cities, tent cities and container cities. There are they built up 250,000 tents and 50,000 containers, and I just read that actually they ordered 50,000 more containers from China, and they expect. It means that there are like hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more than a million people still live in makeshift tents. And actually, this is the official number. They said 800,000 people live in makeshift, meaning that those tents are not really durable to cold weather or rain or anything that you can think of. The United Nations say that Turkey needs more than $100 billion to rebuild those cities. Not the people's life, only the buildings we are talking about over here. So I believe from ILO, I read that around like 850,000 jobs lost. It's gone. And we know how much it costs to recreate a job. We know that in Turkey very well. The numbers are from UNICEF. 4.6 million children in Turkey and more than 2.5 million children have been affected in the earthquake regions. Syria, I want to talk about Syria, especially Syria as well, because generally when people talk about the earthquake, they talk about mostly Turkey, because the earthquakes affect Turkey more, but actually it affects Syria very bad as well. So the Aleppo, Latakia, Hama, Idlib, you guys have heard these from the Syrian civil war. So it's like crisis within crisis. People lived, they had to leave their houses because of the civil war there. Now the earthquake hit them. Most of them were already relying on humanitarian aid, most of which was coming from Turkey. And some parts were entirely actually relied on the humanitarian aid. See that, so the earthquake hit southeastern Turkey. Those parts of Turkey were feeding and giving help to the northwestern Syria. Now that part of Turkey needs help. So it means that part of Syria, northwestern Syria, actually couldn't get help for quite a long time. People were helpless, and they were saying that they think that they were left alone by the world. Gaziantep, which is my hometown, is the home of many humanitarian NGOs, and actually home of the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So the crisis over there is still heating, sanitation, health, food, and education. These are just fun pictures. I don't want to put any graphic pictures over here, except for the one on the center. So the left, top left is from City Diyarbakir. The top right is from Şanlıurfa. Bottom left is from Malatya. Bottom right is from Aleppo. The destruction was everywhere. It wasn't like a couple of buildings collapsed. At the center one, that gentleman's name is Mesut Hançer. He is from Kahramanmaraş, one of the hardest cities. By the way, each of these cities are as big as Cincinnati, almost as big as Cincinnati. So we are not talking about small towns here. And I don't know if you guys can see, but she is holding hands here. She is holding his daughter's hand. She was 15 years old, and her name was Irmak, which we can translate as Nehir, river in English. And she held it for quite some time, and the photojournalists say that. That the picture is from actually Agence France Presse or Agency France Presse. And the other day, she was, her dead body was removed from the debris. The top left is my hometown, Gaziantep. It wasn't, the city center was not hit that much bad. The interesting thing about that in the Gaziantep was the most damage was to the newer side of the city. I mean, not the old buildings collapsed, the newer buildings collapsed in Gaziantep. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. This is Hatay. This one is Hatay. They say that almost the entire city center is uninhabitable right now. They're either collapsed or the buildings were severely damaged. And I'm going to show you guys a video later on at the end of this presentation, but this picture may not be that clear, but this is the city center of Kahramanmaraş. You can see how many buildings are gone. These are multi-floor apartment buildings. It's not like the single house that we have in the United States suburban cities. It's not like that. Every apartment building has like 20, 30, 40 housing units. Some of them actually in this one, I'm going to talk about that, maybe we can talk about that later. It actually holds 250 housing units. More than 1,000 people live in one apartment, one big apartment. So why this much death and destruction? Maybe we will discuss, the panelists will discuss some of them, and we can touch on them. One of them is related to earthquake characteristics. I just talked about them, the magnitudes, the super event, etc. It happened on a densely populated area. So some of the cities and towns were actually exactly on top of the fault lines. The timing, it happened at 4:17 a.m. in the morning. People were sleeping. And at 1:24 p.m., the second one happened. People were not expecting a big one, so people actually went into the buildings because of the cold weather, because of rain, because of snow, and etc. And they were caught in the already damaged buildings from the first one. The aftershocks actually caused a lot of death as well, some of them exceeding 6 magnitude. Sub-freezing temperature, it happened in the winter, and that part of Turkey is especially cold. And that part of Syria is especially cold as well. AIDS, unfortunately, arriving late, and we will talk about the reasons of that. Maybe we can talk about reasons of that later on. And finally, of course, the cost of construction and lack of enforcement of construction costs. That was one of the other ones. Let me show the video. It's basically before and after drone footage of some couple areas in Turkey. This is Hatay. You can see the entire buildings are gone. They collapsed. Because of the size of the destruction, and there was no way to reach out every single building, unfortunately. And this is Kahramanmaraş, this is that I just talked about. Probably one thing catches your attention over here. One building is standing up, nothing happened to that one, and the next building collapsed. And most of this is due to actually construction issues, unfortunately. This is Kahramanmaraş City Center. I remember that little mosque very vividly when I visited Kahramanmaraş. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bulent. I think we all have a greater sense of the gravity and extent of the earthquake. And I know for our panelists, this must be especially difficult to see these images. So Again, thank you for talking with us today about this. We're going to move through some questions with the panelists, and then we'll have Q&A from the audience. And the first question, and Ada, if you don't mind starting it off, just tell us how you first heard about the earthquake and your initial reaction to the news.
Well, I was at home looking at social media. I saw that, and then I didn't first understand the extent of it. I texted my family in Turkey, and they learned it from me because they were sleeping as well. And then from there it started weeks of looking at social media, looking at things, trying to understand what's happening there. And since the information was not totally accurate coming there, the figures, we know it wasn't correct. It started a period of anxiously waiting, following up what's happening there.
Murat?
Yeah, I'm from Hatay. It is one of the cities that the earthquake hit directly. We visited one of our friends. He's from Kahramanmaraş. It is another city that hit by the earthquake. And my dad called me at 7:30 p.m. So it's a very unusual call to me, and I was very excited. I spotted something happened bad. I responded to the phone, and then my dad told me that our home collapsed. It is just two-story building, and it's collapsed. And they are alive, thanks to God. But it shocked us. And my friend, again, he's from Kahramanmaraş. Then we just look at the internet and understood the scope of the problem.
Bulent?
My brother lives in Columbus, and he actually texted me and told me that a major earthquake happened in Gaziantep. I was shocked because I lived two major earthquakes back in Istanbul in 1999, and my first reaction was actually to try to reach out to my family members, and I tried to call them, and I tried to text them, and then find out that I tried to find out if whether my immediate relatives are safe or not. And then after that, I moved on to the other extended relatives and tried to find out if they're safe as well, and tried to get a hold of them. And of course, right away I opened TV and started watching YouTube videos about that. And I was satisfied with the information I was getting from there, and decided to switch to Twitter, where actually most of the things happen in Turkey. So I switched to Twitter and realized, very fast that actually this is a very big event, very, very big event. That's how I learned, what's going on.
I'm going to follow up on this question if I could, and any of you feel free to answer, but it's interesting that mainly you're learning about it from social media and text and calls home, and less so from just general media. Is that, you think, a function of how much attention we pay in the United States to world events, or a change in the media, or just the personal nature of this? It just struck me that the middle of the night you're calling home or getting a call from home.
Well, I myself do not watch actual TV almost at all. That is one thing. If I mostly rely on social media and a couple media outlets for that, and I don't do that much reading from the general outlets like Guardian or New York Times, etc. And from personal experience also, I know that the news actually travels fast through social media. So if you want to learn the details of what's going on the floor and in the region, in Turkey or wherever it is, actually you can find more information. That's my experience, more information right away. Maybe not that reliable, but you can find the details of the things happening wherever the event is happening through social media.
Other thoughts on?
I may also add that there is a somewhat state control on media indirectly because of their relationships of doing business with the government. So sometimes the news are not that reliable. So we know which channels to look, we know which media outlets to follow, we know which ones give things more objectively. That's why I follow those channels, and on top of it, social media for some things they may hesitate to put it on TV.
All right, thoughts?
Yeah, I directly, contacted to with my friends and then learned everything from them. I had many phone calls directly and try to learn the scope of the problem, and also try to reach out to our friends, relatives, and other people in need of help. And some people organize, self-initiated support and help to the regions, and we try to support them, and also follow those efforts through the social media directly.
Let me stay with you, Murat, if I could, for a moment, because my next question is, you've addressed a little bit, but if you could delve into it a little more. Have you or anyone you know been directly affected by the earthquake? And if so, can you relate some of those experiences?
Yeah, so again, my parents, siblings, and my close friends directly affected from this earthquake. So the problem, my parents are old. They are nearly now 8 years old, and when I talk with them, they are thankful that they are alive, but now, they don't want to start a new life. They don't have that energy to build something from scratch, and I see that one all the time. They are very emotional regarding that, and same thing for my friends. And when I talk with them, they are now in trauma. They don't want to live in that region anymore. They would like to travel to other states that may not be hit by the earthquake again. So the only thing I can tell, Mark, I think is trauma, on people. And even when I talk with my siblings, they say they cannot sleep because of the, continuing, earthquakes. And yeah.
So, Bulent, thoughts on this? And I think, for all of us, it's important, we see what's happened in terms of big numbers of thousands of people dead, injured, homes, but on a more personal relationship standpoint, what are you hearing of what's the effect for you, Ada?
My family is in Istanbul. I don't have direct relatives there, but a college friend of mine lives there, and before this panel, I talked to her, and we have a chat group, so we were getting updates from college friends from that area on what's happening.
And what sorts of things do they tell you?
What really touched me, my friend's house, it didn't collapse. They were emotionally affected, but she's trying to help other people, even though psychologically they are not in the best state. So we have this college friend group, we send money to her, and she gives people directly. She finds people who need help, because there are so many people that need help, even though people like you donated money to there, so many people need help. It's going too slowly, and it doesn't cover all her expenses. So we moved to this model of helping people directly. You find somebody who's in there, you give that person, and that person gives to those people, which is much faster than what they will have gotten from the government.
And I just let everybody know, those here in the audience, you can see on the slide the QR codes. Our panelists have taken some time to curate some places where you might be able to give, so that you can consider helping out in that way. And if I could stay with you for just a moment, when you talk about help, what changed in daily life? I mean, people are living in the remains of a home or have no home. Bulent, your work and the supply chain is disrupted. How are people eating or getting water? I mean, what's a daily life like right now in the damaged areas?
Some people live in tent camps outside of the city, so things are more organized for them. They wait in line to get bread, they wait in line to get water, so it's a lot of waiting in lines. Schools are closed, but if you are in a tent camp area, they take their kids to the activities in tent camps, which is helping. But not everybody is in those areas, and the tents, it's not very durable way of living. So it affects everything in that area, from security to healthcare. Some people are there, some people are a small group of people living in container houses, which is much better than a tent. And some people are in neither. Let's say they live in a greenhouse. Let's say some Syrian immigrants, some of them are in tent camps too. Let's say the ruins of their house, they put a tent and they try to live here. The problem with that is they don't have the showers, they don't have the restrooms, the tent camps there. It's harder to get water. So let's say soldiers come in, they give cases of water to one family, and then they go family by family. So it's harder for them. And when I was talking to my friend, what really touched me is you wake up one day, you don't have anything. Now you need other people. These are people who are not used to getting help from other people, being in need of money. So it's very devastating for them to, asking for money, and it's kind of embarrassing, even though it's not their fault. I mean, it could have happened to any one of us. So when I heard it, it really felt bad.
Bulent, can you kind of do the same, paint a picture for us, or what you're hearing from people, friends, family that you've talked to?
My entire family, almost everyone except for my brother who lives in Columbus, lives in the earthquake hit area. So my village is like around 10 miles to the Pazarlik, which was the epicenter of the earthquake. My dad and my mom was not there at the time. They were in Gaziantep. My sister, she has a flat on the 9th floor of a building. And when I called her and asked her what happened, she was shaking and crying. And you can see the fear in her eyes. I told her what happened. She said that she jumped from the bed with the earthquake, and then the first reaction of hers was actually to go to kids and take them to safety. So my brother-in-law, he actually went to one room, my sister went to another room. They took the kids and they put next to a sofa, which she thought, I believe, which was a smart way, and I would do the same thing. I did the same thing in 1999 earthquake, because when the buildings collapse, you know that something should hold you, and tables and chairs cannot hold those kind of weight, so you go to next to a sofa and lie. And she did that. She waited for the thing to pass out. She said she froze, and at one time we were hearing the screams coming from her neighbors. The kids were screaming. When it's calmed down, the earthquake calmed down, she took the kids and everyone through the stairs from 9th floor. There is no elevator, it's not working, there's no electricity, everything is dark. They used their cell phones, lights. And then she said that the only thing she could take was actually the sandals as shoes, and the kids were in pajamas, nothing else. So they went down, and she says she vividly remembers the thing that fallen off on the stairs when they were trying to find their way out. When they went out, it was freezing cold. It was raining. There was snow on the floor. They had a car to get in. They were lucky in that sense. Many people actually had to stay out in sub-freezing temperature for quite some time. They couldn't do anywhere to go because of all those aftershocks happening all the time. It's just not one, two, happening. It's like every 10, 15 minutes you're feeling another earthquake. That was their short story. But not everyone could get out. She had a neighbor. She kind of regretfully says that she couldn't ask if they needed help. And the neighbor had a handicapped teenage or old boy. And then actually they had to wait, they remained in the flat for the 2 earthquakes. And they asked help after that. And she asked, why didn't you ask us for help? She said, because your hands were busy. You were taking care of, you were trying to take care of yourself, and you were trying to take care of your family. We couldn't ask. We couldn't even ask help to take, because you cannot go into the building when you see that the building is actually shaking. My other sister, they have a house in Gaziantep as well. They had a 2-story house, so they weren't affected that much. But they couldn't leave the city to go to our village in they think it's relatively safe because you have water, you have electricity, you have heating in the village, but you don't have actually any of those things in the city center. Everything is cut off. She couldn't go because her daughter, my nephew, she's a nurse, and the hospital didn't allow the nurses to leave their shifts for 2 days because no one's coming. She was working when the earthquake happened. She couldn't go. My dad, they were relatively in a newer building, thanks God, and nothing happened to them. But my sister said that my dad's face, and I know him as a brave man, by the way, was entirely white. He was so scared, what was happening in that one. She said there was no water. There was nothing for 2 days. They couldn't reach out to anything. They went to a gas station, for example, and there was nothing left in the gas station. And I'm not even talking about the queue to buy the gas at that time. And one more time, she was one of the lucky ones. She had the means. She had a car. She could go a couple of places. She didn't have to. They spent the entire night in a house, a small house. We call them baevi. It's like a house that you go in the weekends, a small house, and it has a small garden. So she said that 10 families actually stayed in one room for that night, and the other night they all went to our village house, let's put it that way, a village house, and they all remained there for a couple of days until they know what's going on the floor. And this was actually, I recommend them to do that. A friend of mine who lives in Pittsburgh right now, he lived the 1999 earthquake in Izmit. And he says that, hey, if you have family in Gaziantep right now, ask them to leave. Because for the next couple of months, all they will see is death, destruction, and smell. The smell of dead people under the debris. And I told them, just leave for your psychology, for your well-being, go to the village and stay there for some time. So logistics of it, the roads were gone. I mean, they couldn't go through the roads because the roads actually hit the earthquake hit the roads as well. The roads were like, think of the roads this way, the road was shifted this way for a couple of meters. And in some regions, actually, you could see ravines, 4 to 8 meters long, and in some areas, it's like a football field long, big valleys you can see created by the earthquake. So logistics, I mean, you cannot have logistics in those kind of situations, unfortunately.
So are people leaving on foot, or what is?
They were walking, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, until some time, of course, not every road was affected,
Right.
but not every city or every village could reach out because of this issue as well.
But one of your slides, I think I remember 3.3 million people who've left the area.
Yes,
And
gradually, not just
Yeah.
right after that one. They left gradually because they have nowhere to go. So they left either, if you have means, they either just left and rented another place, which actually caused skyrocketed prices in rent costs in other cities of Turkey because of the earthquake victims are leaving and going to other cities. That's why, unfortunately, some homeowners consider this one as an opportunity and increase the rent costs. And some of them actually moved temporarily to other regions, and government actually put some of them in dormitories as well.
Murat, I'd like to come back to you. Anything, images or stories that you've heard directly that are like this, take us there to the scene of what people's daily lives are like right now.
Yeah, I think the most touchy situation is the screams of the people needing help. And when I talk again with my siblings, I think that is the most thing that hit me. Yeah, and I don't want to share some graphic situations here, but when your beloved ones under debris, I think we are going to feel that one most, the pain. Yeah, I think. And I cannot imagine that. So when I talk with my sister, she stayed locked in the building, and she couldn't get out for 3 hours. They were crying, and it was a very touchy situation for me too. I cannot help, I told her that if I were there, I will come and try to get you out, but you can't do anything. You are here. Those are the things that hit me a lot.
I want to, and this is an open question to any of you on the panel, but some of the things you have said I'd like to delve into. What is this like for children? The adults, here it is, and we had to deal with all this, but to be a child in this situation, and what do you say as a parent, and how do you, I wonder, for children.
Well, I can talk about the experience of my sister's children, my nephews, and she has 3 of them. One of them is around like 11 years old, and the other one is like 6, 7 years old, and the smaller one is 4 years old. And they're still in trauma. They are still in the trauma. All of them are sleeping. Dad, mom, and 3 kids, they're sleeping in the same room on the same mat. They're just sleeping next to each other. Actually, I have a picture on my cell phone that they're lying on the floor and then trying to sleep together. They don't want their parents to leave, their side. Yesterday, I talked to my sister and asked about how they are doing. She said that last week the schools opened, like 2 weeks ago in Gaziantep, not every place, but in Gaziantep they opened the school 2 weeks ago. And actually, there was an aftershock, and the kids felt that. And the teachers had to call them and ask the parents to come and pick up the kids because they couldn't calm down the kids. They were affected that bad. I mean, the youngest one, she's like 4 or 5 years old, her name is Daphne, and she's asking her mom if another earthquake happens, if she would be able to save her. They are living it. They can see the death around them. They can see the destruction around them all the time. They are still at the city center. They know what's going on. They live through that. Anything, if she say that even a slight aftershock happens, they start screaming. They just start screaming right away. I told to another person, she's a teacher. She was in Marash, Kahramanmaraş, one of the hardest cities, and she took her 3 kids to Antalya, another a coastal city in Turkey, and at the Mediterranean side. She had the means to do that, but she said that she cannot work right now. And I asked her, why can't you work? Because the kids say that they don't want their mom to leave their side, and they're just stuck around her all the time. So the kids are, I don't know if it will be ever possible for the kids to go to get over this kind of trauma, because it's not just, we have these, medical professionals who can talk to them, etc., but the number of children, number of people affected, it's not just possible. People just cannot do that.
Anyone else on this subject? Or, if not, Ada, I wonder if you could, are there particular challenges for women in this situation?
The housing issue affects women, their kids, their families, and the aid workers who are there to help. So because the housing is mostly in tents, they are lucky to get a tent, it causes security issues. Let's say you stay in front of ruins of your house, you close the tent, it's not secure. And there has been harassment and violence issues in the area. It also creates privacy issues. Imagine you living in a tent with another family, let's say 11, 15 people under one big tent, and imagine you need to breastfeed your kid. Time for menstruation period time, changing clothes, everything is an issue. On top of that, since they live in tents, shared areas, it brings lots of illnesses. They use shared bathrooms, the showers if they are living in tent camps. So this puts women in risk of bunch of women illnesses. And after the earthquake, because of the stress of it, some pregnant women had to give early birth. And as I said, there are health issues, there are security issues, privacy concerns. And on top of that, when you have healthcare issues, it's difficult, even though they are getting help from healthcare workers, the healthcare workers, NGOs themselves, or they're in a top position, they don't have secure housing. So this everything comes from this housing issue that is not being securely built, and women in charge of taking care of families mostly. So it puts extra work on their shoulders.
Murat, Ed had mentioned security, and this is your field a little bit. We think about if there's a disaster in the United States, fairly quick dispatch of the National Guard and other aid services. Could you talk about what the response looks like in Turkey, and what's the security picture right now for, Ada mentioned looting, for example, and just personal privacy and protection?
Yeah, so again, my background is criminal justice, and I'm a former cop, a major from Turkish National Police, and I know the situation in Turkey before 2012, and I came here after 2012, and I can explain, your question in this way, and I can tell that, in rescue operations, first 24 hours is very important, and there was nothing actually after the earthquake. There was no help, within the first 24 hours. Then a little bit more for the second 24 hours, within 48 hours, and then national and local rescue teams deployed to the region on the third day. So I can tell you that there was nothing. So, and I would like to provide you some statistics in order to see the unpreparedness of the institutions and political system in Turkey that affected this problem. In 1999, the earthquake in Istanbul and Kocaeli, military deployed to the region very fast. They were at the region when the earthquake hit the states, and they rescued. And the number of the soldiers deployed to the region around 65 to 70,000, and it just hit 3 cities normally, that earthquake, and the military, number of military deployed around 70,000. And I look at some theses in order to get official numbers, and in those theses, people say that more than 10,000 people, rescued by the military, and some say that it is 20,000 people rescued by the military, since they responded to earthquake very fast. But when we come to the recent earthquake, only I think 3,500 military personnel deployed to the region, and they deployed after 2 days. Okay, and the number of rescued people is around 350. 350. And there are, I can answer your questions, regarding why this happened. If you have any questions, I can explain more, but I would like to stop here. So then, when you look at these two statistics, you are going to understand the scope of the problem in terms of the emergency responses. And I'm happy to answer.
Well, let me just follow up, and really with everybody on that. Let's give us some sense of governance in Turkey and government response. I think in general we think of Turkey as some form of democracy, but with some not full-on acceptance. And I know all of you have mentioned, Bulent, especially in your presentation, that the official numbers don't really reflect the true extent of it. It's not immediately obvious to me, and maybe the audience, why would the government want to minimize, those numbers are so big, you hate to use the word minimize, but to not fully explain the extent of things. What are we dealing with from a governance standpoint?
Oh, well, I'll just say elections, and you guys will understand what I'm talking about. So there is an election coming up, and the government didn't want to look bad on that front. If actually in just right after the earthquake happened, people started organizing on Twitter, and they kind of the people even under the debris were asking help via Twitter. They're saying, "I'm here. This is my location. Come and get me." And when people started realizing that how inefficient the response was to the earthquake from the government, and when they didn't see the army in the first 2 days on the floor helping people, people started to complain and they started to criticize the government. And the same government actually walked down Twitter's slow speed of the internet. And this resulted in a huge outcry in people. They had to back down. Because people started criticizing the government, the head of the government and everybody over there. That is one aspect of that. And the second aspect is not just the election. The second aspect is they are one of the reasons that this earthquakes had this much effect is actually the relationship of the government with the construction industry. In the last 20 years, they have, I believe, 8 amnesties for the buildings which was not constructed following the guidelines. So let me put the picture here. So let's say that you like to build a house in the United States. What happens? You have the area, you take the blueprints of municipality, the Office of Engineering looks at that, come there, check that, you have a lot of approval process, right? So, I mean, they are looking at the many, gas line, this line and that line, etc. Because I know that I tried to, build a fence, and that took me months. Okay, just a fence. That took months to get the approval from them. Get the approval from the HOA, you guys know that. Get the approval from the city, and then get the plan, and etc. It takes a. I mean, it doesn't work that way in Turkey. So if you want to make a building, I'm talking about an apartment building. I'm not talking about a fence here. You just go there, hire some people, build it illegally there, and then wait for an amnesty. Because you know that there will be an amnesty. You know that the politicians will come to your door and ask for votes in return for amnesty to those construction things. So that is another aspect. And the third aspect is the municipality, because the municipalities were supposed to enforce the codes, the building codes. One thing I should mention, guys, Turkey has a very strict building codes, construction codes. They have. The issue is the lack of enforcement. And the issue is inefficient governance in the municipalities and in the government itself. So, I mean, this is kind of layer over layer corruption. It's not just the government. Government is in it. The construction companies are definitely in it. That's why they made some arrests after the earthquakes. The municipalities are in it. The audit companies are in it. And unfortunately, citizens are in that one. Citizens, I mean, you don't have any expertise to make that building. If you do that, it's like you're building your grave if it is on top of a fault line.
We're getting a little bit close to the end of our time together, and when it's time to close, I want our panelists, Bulent, Ada, and Murat, to talk about how we can help. But I want to remind the virtual audience, if you have a question, type it into the Q&A function, and I want to check with the in-person audience. If you have a question, just raise your hand. Stefan.
So this is for the panel. So we mentioned that there were major earthquakes in the 90s. What are your thoughts on the lessons learned from those earthquakes in the 90s and how they were applied to this recent earthquake?
I can start with that. So after the 1999 earthquake happened, Turkey actually revised its construction regulations, and they came up with a very strict regulation, which actually I read one of the experts said is actually stricter than the regulation in the United States. So we have that. So we have those regulations. They just right after the earthquake happened in 1999, which I actually happened to experience, unfortunately, both of them. There were 2 of them. We always looked at the biggest one, August 17, but there was another one which happened like 3 months later, 2-3 months later, just around like 100 miles east of Istanbul as well. They put we in United States, we named the bills. They put a bill called earthquake tax. So they put tax almost everything else. And the goal, the sole goal of the earthquake tax was, and that's what we were told at least, was actually to retrofit the buildings and get the government ready to those earthquakes. And by that, we thought that we were trying to get ready, for the earthquake in the Istanbul region, because that's the most populous area in Turkey, and that's the kind of the economic heart of Turkey. That area is known as for that one. But at this earthquake, we found out actually they used this money for anything else but earthquake. So we learned, I mean, on paper, we learned the lessons. There's nothing wrong with that, but it really comes to people. You may have the best laws out there, unless you have no people to enforce that, they are meaningless. So we had that situation in Turkey, unfortunately, right now. And I do hope that, and I'm hopeful always, I do hope that this time we're gonna learn the lessons from this earthquake, and from now on we're gonna, move on to maybe different things. Now in Turkey, the building stocks are made by concrete, reinforced concrete. They use reinforced steel in the construction. Now I'm reading that actually people are moving to light steel and heavy steel construction. We don't have, we have wood construction like we have in the United States. Wood construction in only certain places in Turkey. Overwhelming majority of the buildings are built by concrete, and unfortunately that concrete is not that good. We learned that in Istanbul earthquake as well. So when you hear about concrete, you like something really concrete, right? But in that earthquake, I remember vividly the scene that one of the engineers were taking a debris, his hand, and he was like putting all the concrete with his hand, because they don't use enough amount of cement in that one, they don't put any reinforced stuff in that one, you name it. Okay, so everything was wrong. I cannot say that we learned nothing, so that is the negative part. I can easily say that when you look at the building, I actually say that one building collapsed, but the other one is nothing happened. So it shows that actually we learned something. That's why I'm saying that I'm hopeful that in future we're gonna do better. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think it's a great answer.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions in the audience? We do have one virtual request, and we'll do this as we close, but that the QR codes be up on screen, and also for everyone who registered, we'll send those QR codes out as after this. And also, this is being recorded, so there will be a video available if you want to share it with friends. Let me see, it just came in from the virtual audience. I'm a board member of an organization called Water with Blessings, and we provide basic water filters for people in need of clean drinking water. So feel free to contact us, and we'll send some filters to Turkey. So
We will. Thank you.
yeah, and maybe that's a good segue for us to just Murat, Ada, Bulent, can you? You've given us both the really imposing scale of this, but also the personal level of it. And here we sit in Highland Heights, Kentucky, as individuals wondering how we might help. So is that possible for us to lend a hand in some way?
We shared links. Bridge to Turkey Foundation especially works with an organization called Ahbap, and when I talked to my friend yesterday, she said Ahbap really does a lot of work on the ground. So if you check out Bridge to Turkey Foundation, that money goes to Ahbap, and not everybody can have means to donate, but at least keep these people in your minds and send prayers and good thoughts.
Yeah, I echo the same thing with Ada. Please try to canalize your donations to the local municipalities or the organizations that we share. Even European Union and World Bank, directly support now local governments in order to see where their funds go or donations go. So it's better to make donations to the local municipalities or Ahbap. Then we are going to be sure that your donations will reach out to needed people.
Bulent, anything to add on that?
Yes, I will just echo that. By the way, Ahbap is run by a rock singer, so if you are listening to rock, so that may be another aspect. I love his songs, and I used to listened to that guy for quite some time. He turned out to be a really great person who helps people. I mean, it's not just earthquake. Whenever something happens, a flood happens, a fire happens, a forest fire happens, nobody's harmed, but he uses his network of volunteers in the entire Turkey, and then he just asks them to help, and everybody just follows that guy. I don't know what if he runs for president, probably he's gonna win, but that's another joke. Apap is one of them, but if you say that you'd like to help people in Syria as well, and one more time I'd like to emphasize that people in Syria needs help as well. So I shared the Charity Navigator. We shared the Charity Navigator. I'm pretty sure you're going to find a couple, 8 organizations there who can help people in Syria. And also, if you are, lots of things can needs to be happen in that area. If you're into education, there are charity organizations who help in education only. If you're into food, if you want your money to go only food, if you want your money to go to health issues, women issues, child issues, anything that you can find, as long as you guys help, please help. People need help there. Thank you.
Well, we're just pretty much at our closing time, but I wonder if each of you have some closing thoughts for the audience. Murat?
I'm good.
One thing I just want to briefly mention, I couldn't get a touch on, is this case of LGBTQ people.
Mm-hmm.
When something like this happens, the vulnerable people gets more difficulty, and they had so much difficulty because they couldn't, after the earthquake, it was hard for them to get in line with other people to get food, go to another cities. So the network of LGBTQ people in Turkey help each other, but it was very difficult time for them. So thoughts and prayers to all of them, all the vulnerable groups and the earthquake victims.
Bulent?
Well, Mark, thank you so much, first of all, for this opportunity, and thank you all for joining us here and virtually as well. I'm glad that, in being here and feeling the, having the feel to do nothing is something. I'm glad that you guys gave us this opportunity to do at least something to the people, for the people there. Thank you.
Well, I think, Bulent, it may have been you said, but at some point I heard the phrase that in Turkey people feel left alone in the world, and to the extent that we can address that as individuals, it's a privilege to do so. First of all, just if we could just say thank you. This is our gratitude for helping us learn about this and giving us the opportunity to help in some way. Quickly in closing, I just want to tell everybody that next up for the Northern Kentucky Forum is we are organizing some focus groups, one in each county, Boone and Campbell County, to talk about local media and how we consume it, what's the landscape look like, what would you as residents of the area like to know, and so we're looking forward to your participation in those focus groups, and we'll collect your comments and distribute those to our local media providers. So look for that next with the Northern Kentucky Forum. Thanks again, everyone, for being with us, and I really appreciate the panelists for broadening our horizons this morning. So, and good day.